Remnant is from the developers of Darksiders, which I didn't really like, so going in I didn't have high expectations. Remnant from the Ashes takes heavy inspiration from various games, most notably the Souls franchise, and third-person shooters such as Gears of War. The controls feel decent enough. You have a rolling maneuver similar to Gears of War / Dark Souls, where it gives you invincibility frames in your dodge rolls. The shooting feels decent, and there's numbers flying out of enemies with each attack, but unfortunately the controls can also be a massive pain in the ass and feel artificially challenging in some instances. For example, you cannot hip fire or shoot without zooming all the way into the screen, which means more often than not, you'll be getting hit by things you can't see because you're too busy zoomed in to even be able to defend yourself. This loop becomes very annoying. Why can't I just shoot from the hip? Why do I have to zoom all the way into the screen just to defend myself? A very obvious and major plus to the game, and the reason I bought it, is that it has full campaign co-op. You can play the entire game with a friend, which means all the boss fights will get kinda passionate and angry, because the game also becomes harder in co-op, as well as all the enemies and bosses get increased health and damage. The game cycle involves a hub world, where you go to a handful of different vendors to buy consumables and upgrades for your equipment. And from there you touch a crystal in the middle to teleport to different zones of the world. But the zones of the game unfortunately feel copy-pasted a lot. You have different templates, such as swampland, city streets, industrial building zones, and forestry type places. But other than that, there's almost absolutely nothing identifiable or different about them. Everything looks the same, and it's very easy to get turned around and accidentally backtrack because of the lack of any identifiable landmarks for the most part. The enemy design is varied, which is a strength, but almost every checkpoint / loading zone will have different enemies, and it never feels like you fight the same thing all too often, which is both a pro and a con, because while there's a lot of enemy variety, you don't get to see them too much. The skill tree revolves around unlocking lots of traits, which you get by performing various activities in the game. By the end of the game you have so many of these, it does feel like you have a big variety of things to choose from, like maximum health, reload speed, crit chance, XP gain, and stuff like that. It is kind of exciting to unlock these new traits. But now onto the serious drawbacks and massive flaws that I have with this game. It's supposed to be an RPG, full of stats and stuff, but the fatal flaw is that the itemization sucks. It is totally expected and normal to play the entire game with the starter gear, the starter weapon, and the starter armor set. It's total fail. I don't need to explain how boring this is. Imagine any other RPG where there's no fucking items. How did they mess this up? Even for a shooter game, one weapon? I mean, there's items you can find, but they're so hidden and few and far between, it's not even expected that a player will find any on their first run. All you find are rings and amulets. 10 hours into the game, and I was still using the same starter weapon and armor set, just upgraded to do more damage. It's so boring. I want variety and cool armor and weapons to use. This alone made the game seriously flawed. Vendors mostly consist of visiting the same person every time, upgrading your armor and weapon for more defense and damage, or going to another vendor and buying consumables such as a potion that gives more firing rate, or giving yourself ammo. That's basically it. It's incredibly basic and forgettable. Here's another example. Weapon mods are a big thing in this game, where you can attach different alternate attacks to your guns, such as fire damage, or healing, or shooting a swarm of insects. However, again, there are barely any of them to unlock by the end of the game. I only had like 3 of them, and mostly ended up using the same mod the entire game. What the hell? When you kill bosses, you can exchange a boss item for new weapons, and by the end of the game I had like 1 or 2 of these, but they were so unappealing and gimmicky I didn't want to use them. At the very end of the game I unlocked an assault rifle thing and 2 pieces of armor, which was a good change of pace, but too little too late. The bosses are mostly a miss and a failure. For example, the vast majority of boss fights are just a big bullet sponge guy, and then waves upon waves of generic enemies. More often than not, the boss himself isn't the challenge. It's the never-ending wave of trash mobs that he spawns that make it challenging. And this happens for almost every single boss fight. Not to mention that a significant amount are just straight-up rip-offs of Souls bosses. Very few bosses have anything unique or identifiable about them. It's just shoot the big bullet sponge guy, and then stop and attack the minions when they spawn. Total miss. However, a small amount of bosses are actually extremely challenging, engaging, and different, like the dual butterfly boss encounter that constantly spams balls of lightning at you and does a million attacks. Well, it took hours to beat this guy, and even had to go back and grind some traits up. This was the most I invested into the entire game, and it got very intense but annoying, but in the end I was able to defeat it, and the challenge felt worth it. There are some choices you can make which change the course of the campaign. You can choose to kill certain bosses, or to help them. At first they are incredibly hard, but you can come back later and refuse to help them, and finally kill them and unlock some different weapon attacks and such. All of the enemies and items are randomly generated, so nothing is cleverly placed for you to discover or encounter. It's all made by a random number generation. I don't know if this is positive or negative. On the one hand, it makes repeated playthroughs more interesting and varied, but on the other hand, it removes the carefully handcrafted clever placement. As for the presentation, mostly the technical side of the game and graphics can be impressive at times. The lighting and reflections of the water, the cloth physics of your cloak swinging around, it does look next gen. But personally it doesn't check out for me. The game has a serious obsession with the color red, and most of the game's world is tinted red and it starts to get repetitive and grating. While the game has a lot of enemies, none of them are truly appealing or intimidating. The entire art style of the game looks more like a Marvel comic book than any real sinister or scary believable world. Everything has this cartoony, over-designed fantasy look that's just really unappealing for me. Especially the faces. The faces in this game look like total shit. Looks like a shitty cartoon or something. I don't know how else to describe it. The art style is just not appealing. As I said, there's barely any guns in the game, at least on the first playthrough. And as such, you are using the same gun for the entire game, and it doesn't even look cool. It has all this stupid scrap attached to it, and looks totally bizarre and fantasy, and it's just not all that fun to shoot it because it looks so stupid. Another fail. None of the world really stands out as anything memorable. The art style of the whole game isn't the best, but it isn't the worst. It's just an average looking cartoony game. But as I've said, the technical graphics of the game can look impressive. It has modern lighting, shadows, and details, so it's just okay, let down by unappealing art style at times. I can't even comment about the story. Seriously, I don't know. I can't even speak a single sentence about what the story is. It was never appealing or interesting, and none of the characters were interesting either. I can't tell you a single character's name in the entire game, or boss, or anything really. Seriously, 20 minutes after I finished the game, if you put a gun to my head and demanded me to tell you a character from Remnant, I would be hard-pressed to tell you one. So I guess the story sucks, but at least it's irrelevant and does not get in your way. You basically always have control of your character, and the story does not interrupt you. If you want to learn more about the story, you can do so on your own terms, so that's a positive thing I guess. I went into Remnant looking for a Souls-styled shooter, and while it's not really much like that outside of the role mechanic, what I got was a third-person shooter with very light elements of RPG. The itemization is total shit, and the upgrades are very minimalist, and only serve to basically scale you up with damage and health as the game progressively gets harder. The shooting is solid enough, as is the movement, so the game never feels that bad to play or boring. And it's fully co-op, but in my opinion, it could have done so much more and missed a lot of cues. 6 out of 10.
If you've got nothing left to lose, just do yourself a favor, huh? Accept the price you paid to get there. It'll help you when it's over.